We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
But not very heavily cratered, so it must be relatively new. This is the Sea of Fertility, and we're coming up on a large crater, the Delta Rim variety. Has a strange circular crack pattern around the middle of it. About 30 or 40 miles across. How's your picture quality, Houston?
This is phenomenal.
There's an interesting rill directly in front of the spacecraft now. Running along the edge of a small mountain. Rather sinuous shape with right angle turns.
I like to see the crater disappear off the edge of the screen, on the right-hand side.
This area just to the west of the Sea of Crisis is called the Martian Fleet. And to the west of that is the Sea of Tranquility. Can you see the fracture pattern going across the bar in front of us now, Houston?
It doesn't quite stand out.
There's a series of cracks or faults across the middle of the mare. They drop down in about 3 steps to the south. The parallel fault pattern to the north has a drop down in the center. I hope that all of you back on Earth can see what we mean when we say it's a rather foreboding horizon, a rather dark and unappetizing looking place. We're now going over approaching one of our future landing sites, selected in this smooth region to call the Sea of Tranquility. Smooth in order to make it easy for the initial landing attempt, in order to preclude having to dodge mountains. Now you can see the long shadows of the lunar sunrise.
I believe you can see the darkness creeping in from the left-hand side of your picture, if I'm not mistaken, as they approach the dark area of the moon.
We are now approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning was the first day. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning was the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
There you are, the crew of the Apollo 8 signing off after their last transmission of pictures from the moon by reading what, if a long memory serves me right, are the opening sentences from the book of Genesis in the Bible, which tells of the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the separation of night and darkness, and the seas and the land, and wishing all of us on this New Year's Eve a Merry Christmas, back on what they called the good earth. We're now passing into the dark side of the moon, Frank, as they said they were. And before the Christmas message, at the end, they were describing the physical features of the moon as they saw them, finding it foreboding, forbidding, unappetizing, unattractive. And Commander Borman in the beginning didn't quite say it, but he came close to saying it was a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there or work there. He said it didn't appear to be a very inviting place to live or work. If we could get sight of them through the telescope in Houston, we should be doing so about now as they pass from the lower right to the upper left part of your picture on a line from about 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock. As they go into the darkness, the moon will be dark, but they would be high enough to still catch the sunlight and offer perhaps a little glimpse. And I'm not sure. I'm not going to risk an opinion here on whether we can see them or not. Well, there is a little white dot. There is, and I'm staring at it, but I'm not sure. I'm not either, but there's a white dot out there. About what? Well, it's lower, about a fourth of the way up from the bottom of the screen, about a third of the way in from the left-hand side, almost half the way. It's just above that big round crater at the bottom, above it and slightly to its left. Is it moving, David? Well, Right. No, I'm told that's not it. If we saw it, it would be in the middle of the picture. And I've got some shadow problems here myself. I'll try to correct on my monitor. Well, I can't. But at any rate, I'm sure if we do see it, they will know at the planetarium and we'll point it out to us. It would be nice to see. Well, we're going to try again in a minute with a greater degree of magnification through the telescope in Denver, and we'll be back after.
John Cannon has some thoughts about the public's renewed interest in space. The full magnificence of Apollo 8's flight around the moon is growing steadily in American thought. We had all become rather bored with the space program. Suddenly we realized that for the first time, men have escaped from the orbit of the Earth. This is a tremendous moment in the history of the race. It is our first move out into the universe. None of this century's many dream fulfillments are more sensational, more deeply stirring and significant than the escape from Earth's environment. We are aware of the risks of this flight, but we also have great confidence in the scientific and technological skill with which it has been prepared. What the three astronauts are experiencing right now is beyond the range of prior human perception. Earth, moon, and space have never been seen before as these calm and brave Americans are seeing them now. They are the first in what will unquestionably be a long line of explorers, discerning data which may well revise many of our previous ideas about the universe. We have plenty of problems to solve here on Earth, but we cannot ignore the frontier that stretches to outer space. We must find the resources and the talent to solve problems at both ends of the range, here in our hearts and minds, in our cities and slums, and out there, where so many secrets are untold, where the nature of the universe is to be understood, out there where, perhaps, too, we can gain new perspective on the squalid problems of this obscure planet Earth. And yet, remember, it is here on Earth that we have had the mind power and the capacity to construct the great system now reaching out to the moon. This is Bill County.
Mr. Canham is editor-in-chief of the Christian Science Monitor, a newspaper published in Boston, Massachusetts at the time that this tape is made.
The three astronauts will fire their engines to start back to Earth. And the engine must fire. If it doesn't, they can't get back to Earth. And they have almost completed circling the moon 10 times, and all that remains to make sure that they get back to the Earth is to fire the engine in what probably is the most critical maneuver in the entire flight. They must fire the engine in such a precise thrust that it will power them out of a lunar orbit and start them back toward the Earth. And it will carry them toward a landing in the Pacific Friday morning, ending the most striking exploration of the unknown in the history of man.
Then the decision will have to be made as to what can be done to get that engine started, to bring Apollo 8 home, and there will be some frightful moments here on Earth as well as in the spacecraft 230,000 miles out there in space around the moon while that problem is worked out. We'll be awaiting those developments, of course. They are behind the moon, as we have suggested, on the far side, out of contact with Earth, as they have been on each of the important maneuvers of their flight around the moon, this historic exploration that began early on yesterday morning on Christmas Eve. Now, at 1:19 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Apollo 8 is to come back into contact with the ground, and then we will know if all has gone as planned. If that big engine has fired, if Apollo 8 is indeed freeing itself from lunar orbit and is on the way home. The scheduled maneuvers come at this time. At 1:10, at 16 seconds after 10 minutes after 1, the engine should be started. That burn should last until 1:13:33, just about 3 minutes and 15 seconds. And then, if they are speeded up and are on the way home, they should be coming around the far side of the moon and back in contact with the Manned Space Center in Houston, Texas, at 1:19 a.m. That would be about 9 minutes after the firing of the engine. If by any chance the engine has not fired, they would then be delayed in getting around the far side of the moon, getting around to our side, that is, until about 1:24. So there will be 5 minutes there of breath holding if we haven't heard from them shortly after 1:19. You will recall that every time on the 10 orbits of the moon that they have come around, there is a little bit of interference as they get around the moon on this near side, and there may be some delay in transmission, so we shouldn't get too alarmed if there is a short delay after 1:19. That engine firing is supposed to take place in about 5 minutes from now.
And tonight we've emphasized the absolute necessity for a particular engine on the command and service module of the spacecraft firing. It is a big engine. It's called the S2S system, the service propulsion system. And here to tell us more about it is Peter Hackett. Peter?
Frank, here is that engine. Actually, it's a tiny model
but it gives you a representation of the location of the engine. And I would expect that at this particular moment it's the single most important system aboard the spacecraft. And with me to tell us something about it and how it functions and how it's been tested and how confident we are about it is Alan Moyles, who is a research pilot for North American Rockwell, the major prime contractor, actually, for this entire Apollo project. Mr. Moyles, could you tell us a little bit here on this model about the engine itself? How does it operate?
Right, Peter. The basics of the SPS, Service Propulsion System, are the propellant tank within the service module here, the engine itself, which is located at the throat of this expansion nozzle, and the nozzle at the back end here through which the burn gases are exhausted into space. Now, the propellants are the fuel and oxidizers are what we call hypergolic, that is, they ignite on contact. And when the firing signal comes from the control system, valves in the fuel and oxidizer lines open simultaneously. The propellants come together in the engine injector assembly here, or on the large model you can see up in there at the back of the service module. The ignition takes place. The hot gases are expanded out this expansion nozzle, providing 20,500 pounds of thrust.
Let's take a look at this large full-scale model. This is the actual size of the exhaust nozzle itself. It sticks out about 12 feet behind the service module. Actually, it's been fired several times already on this flight, has it not?
That's correct, Peter. On this flight, it's been fired 3 times. We had a mid-course correction of, I believe it was about 2.5 seconds. We had the lunar orbit insertion 1 burn, which was 4 minutes and 6 seconds, and the lunar orbit insertion 2 circularization burn of 9 seconds.
And let's cut away now to mission control.
This is Apollo Control Houston at 89 hours, 19 minutes into the flight. We're now less than 30 seconds to the scheduled time of ignition for the maneuver to start Apollo 8 on its course back to Earth. In the last 15 seconds prior to ignition, the crew will be burning their service propulsion system, or rather the reaction control system engines to settle propellant. And here in Mission Control Center, we just counted down to the burn. We should have ignition at this time. That will be a 3 minute and 18 second burn nominally. It will increase the spacecraft velocity by about 3,522 feet per second, or some 2,395 miles per hour. Following the maneuver, the spacecraft should have a velocity of about 8,800 feet per second, some 6,000 miles per hour. And here in Mission Control, it is relatively quiet, as it has been since we lost communications with the spacecraft as they went over the moon's horizon. At this point, flight controllers here in Mission Control, as with the rest of the world, they are waiting.
The flight controllers at Mission Control, of course, are in the same position that the rest of us are. They don't know that this has happened, but this is what is supposed to have happened and be happening. And again, since this would be the fourth time on this mission that this engine has been fired up, there's every reason to assume that it will happen. But it will be, well, I think a little less than 10 minutes from now before they will emerge from the far side of the moon and be in contact with the tracking stations on Earth again. And we will get information from them as to how the burn went and see if they are beginning their homeward journey. So they are just sitting there at the various consoles in Houston.
Coming up in just a few seconds now, we should have shutdown of the service propulsion system engine on the spacecraft. That should have occurred at 89 hours. Rather, will be occurring at 89 hours, 22 minutes, 34 seconds. Actually, we are just a little less than a minute from that event. And the clock here in Mission Control Center that is counting down to the time when we will reacquire the spacecraft shows that we have 6 minutes, 30 seconds until reacquisition.
These are the two clocks in Mission Control. My monitor has gone out. I can see the flow monitor there pretty well, I think. What is it? There's 6 minutes now, coming up to 6 minutes.
The engine should be shut down.
Acquisition again.
And we will now be waiting for the spacecraft to come over the lunar horizon and give us a report on their status. We now show 5 minutes, 45 seconds until reacquisition.
Very quiet in Mission Control. We hear no background noise from anybody. It'll be about, I would suspect, 5.5 minutes now until they pick up the tracking of the spacecraft as it emerges from clears the moon's horizon. Comes around from the far side of it. 20 hours ago, when they came around the first time after making the maneuver to put themselves in lunar orbit, there was a screw went up in the control room. At that time, they acquired tracking data on the spacecraft for a good minute or a minute and a half before they heard if the astronauts actually say anything. And so that was a time of some little suspense. We'll keep monitoring this here, and the moment we Hear from Houston if they've established control. We'll get back to that. Or established contact with them. We'll get back to that. But right now, let's go back to Peter Hackett and his guest, who was explaining part of what's going on now, actually. Peter?
Frank, I'd like to ask Mr. Moyles how reliable this engine is. How do we know that it's going to actually function the way it's supposed to?
Well, the engine, of course, Peter, has been tested a number of times. It was fired 8 times on Apollo 7. As I mentioned earlier, it's been fired 3 times already on this mission, and now with the PEI, we should have had our 4th firing. It's also been fired for short durations and long durations on unmanned tests prior to Apollo 7. And, of course, there's been an extensive ground test program in the altitude chambers and at sea level conditions over the past 4 to 5 years. I think it's a very reliable engine. Of course, it's simple and
well, if you can't fire it in one way, are there other ways of firing it, right?
yes, the firing so far on this mission has been through the automatic system used at 89 hours 26 minutes. Flight Director Milton Windler has just advised his flight control team here in Mission Control Center that we have less than 3 minutes now until reacquisition of the spacecraft, and he requested that they monitor their consoles, get prepared to reacquire, and to get a status from the crew.
In other words, just the main firing system fails, or our backup all the way through.
That's correct, Peter. If the automatic system fails to send the ignition signal, we have the capability, the crew can insert the ignition signal with a button on the control panel, and both methods were tested during Apollo 7. And there's a third backup firing signal that can be sent, which bypasses most of the complicated electronics. That's what we call the direct switch to the engine valve.
And when you talk about engines like this being restarted, you talk in terms of seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. It seems to me that that's a rather short period of time to build up reliability.
Well, of course, with an engine like this, reliability is the start and stop cycles, and once the engine is going, the pump valves are open, the engine is up to full thrust, then I think we're talking about duration of firing versus starting and stop capability. And in the space business, of course, with the trajectory corrections that have to be provided by these engines, it's the start-stop reliability and accuracy of timing that really counts. And
what about the components of this particular engine?
Control Houston, we now show less than 30 seconds until reacquisition. We'll stand by for the first word from the Apollo 8 crew as they come over the lunar horizon and into acquisition. Signal, and there's a little bit of a cheer going up from the flight controllers here. We should be hearing from the crew shortly.
They have picked up, while they're tracking the spacecraft, they have not heard verbally from the astronauts yet. And by picking the spacecraft up at the time they did, would indicate that the burn was accomplished successfully right on the tip. And so, as you heard the Ward saying, there was a little bit of a cheer went up at the control room in Houston. We should be hearing the astronauts just very shortly.
So we know the burn has been made, and we know that they are on their way home. 57 hours of flight time ahead of them, but they're on their way home, although we haven't actually heard them say so yet.
They've reported from around the world, challenged the powerful, and they bring all of this to every story that breaks.
We've got breaking news, and it's good news.
And touches your heart.
How do you even say thank you? Thank you is not big enough.
I made this.
Stunned survivors.
yang berubah, I'm